Hello and welcome to the eXp podcast. My name's Ben Moore of eXp UK, and today I'm joined by my co-host Scott Gunn, and together we sit down for the very first episode to discuss who should, and just as importantly, who shouldn't look at starting their own estate agency business. Now, it's fair to say that at the moment there's a big spotlight on self-employed agency in the UK. That won't sound too strange to anyone who's listening from further afield, but over here in the UK, things have always been done very differently. The traditional estate agency business is that the agent themselves take a modest salary and generally quite a poor commission structure in exchange for working a structured 9-to-5 type role. Yet here at eXp, we're trying to challenge that and revolutionise the whole space. In less than 18 months, we've grown from 0 to around 200 estate agents, and over that period of time, we've definitely seen some of the traits that it takes to be a success in this space. We've also heard a lot of the concerns and a lot of the considerations really that people have before starting their own business. And myself and Scott arguably are two of the agents here in the UK that have had the biggest hand in growth in terms of consulting with agents on the outside looking in. So we've put this series together to explore some of the common questions that we're asked and the key considerations that we believe in hindsight you should be thinking about if it is that you're considering starting or scaling your agency in this type of framework. Now, we do a deep dive into a few different topics that I really hope you'll find of some kind of value, but needless to say, if you've got any questions at the end of today's episode, you can reach out directly to myself or Scott anytime. Our contact details can be found in the show notes. So with that said, sit back, relax, get yourself a hot coffee or a cold gin. We're not here to judge. Enjoy today's show and we'll see you on the other side.
I think we're cooking on juice, mate. I think we're on. I think we're recording.
Hope so.
So, guys, first ever episode on the podcast. We don't want to make this too formal. We don't want to make this too structured. Me and Scott, my co-host, we're quite relaxed by nature anyway. And I think this podcast came about, Scott, and feel free to kind of interject at any point, but me and Scott catch up most weeks. We have conversations kind of off the record. We're talking about all things business, mindset, property, eXp, obviously. And every time I get off the call, I always think, do you know what? That would have made a brilliant podcast. Someone somewhere would have got some value from that. It would have answered some questions. And that's happened too many times now to the point where we thought, do you know what? Let's just have a weekly catch up. We'll record it. We'll just shoot the shit. We'll have an open conversation and we'll put it out there. And if anyone out there can get value from it, then that's a massive bonus as well. So I guess what we're trying to get to is that this is going to be a bit of an informal, relaxed, two guys in a pub type chat. And hopefully we can add some value and answer some questions and help you, come to a decision as to if and when you start your agency business and move that forward. So anything you'd add to that, Scott?
Only that I hope at the end of this, we're not thinking we used up every bit of good content we had in previous calls, but hopefully not. I'm a little bit of an estate agency and property nerd. It is probably all I ever want to talk about, really. Even if I end up at a barbecue or something, I find myself in some corner talking about it with somebody who's interested and keen to listen. So, hopefully you end up talking and some like-minded people find it of some interest.
Well, mate, it's good that you're so proud to be an estate agent, because for so long when someone asked me what I did at a barbecue, I'd just kind of shuffle away and hide and I'd mutter, I'm an estate agent under my breath. So it's good to see you're out there loud and proud, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. Always have been. But I've been doing it now for just under 20 years.
Do you know what? Mate, do you know what? Of all the conversations we've had and all the information we pass back and forth, and as much as I like to think that I know you relatively well by this point, kind of 18 months in, I don't actually know your complete backstory. So I wasn't planning on asking this in any way, shape or form, mate, but just shoot it to me, man. What have you been up to before we crossed paths at eXp?
Well, so when I say I've always wanted to be an estate agent, I've always wanted to be an estate agent. I used to look through the property pages when I was about 14, 15. I don't know why. I don't know what caught my attention with it. Just something about it. I think partly not really there's no guns before me that really wore suits to work, and so I think a lot of us like to do things that are a bit different than maybe we've seen our parents do. And so I honestly think probably it was just working in a nice smart office and having a suit on was probably what drew my attention originally. And I like talking to people. So, the idea of just being out and about as well, could not be just stuck in an office. So the more I looked into it, the more I thought, actually, this really appeals to me. So when I was 19, I was working in a pub and a friend of mine had actually interviewed for a job and said, I've interviewed for this job in a estate agency, trainee estate agency role. I think the interview went all right, but to be honest, he was going to do it for 6 months and then go traveling. And he knew I knew that. So I said, look, sorry to do this to you, but that's what I really want to do. And if I know they're looking, I'm going to have to introduce myself. Do you mind? And he said no. And I went down and 24 hours later, got the job, and there we go. And sort of casting my mind back, it was everything I wanted it to be. I remember being given the keys to go out on a viewing. I was like, I've got all this autonomy to drive to a viewing and back and just chat with people, and it's sunny. And I've still got my first pay slip, which was £595 for the month, which I found a really old suit jacket about a year ago. So I've got that in a box somewhere.
Wow.
I remember phoning my dad and saying, Dad, I've earned £600, like it was this huge amount of money. And I've got the easiest job in the world. I remember the conversation. I remember where I was. I remember my dad's reaction, which was, probably trying to just not say that's not a huge amount of money, but just be paid for me. And I just loved it. And then, a couple of months later, what really got me is when that was £1,000. So I had, £400 worth of commission in there. And I started thinking, okay, yeah, I like the sound of this. And sort of went from there. And that was in, I think, 2001, 2002.
Wow, showing your age there, Scott.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've got 40 approaching in the not too distant future. So yeah, absolutely fell in love with the industry. And even when I was sort of 19 and 20, I just used to read what at the time was an actual publication, Negotiator, and you'd sit and read that every weekend. I'd get all excited about the window displays and different lighting and all that kind of thing. And a love affair really that's I've never quite got over. I still love it even now.
So was you always, before kind of kicking off your business, obviously with us, was you always employed in like a traditional sense?
Yeah, well, yes and no. So I was employed up until around about 2008, when we had the financial crisis and things got really difficult. And the company that I was involved with switched to a franchise model where you would actually, a little bit like almost like a barber salon, right? Instead of renting your chair, you rent a desk for a certain amount of money, and you got to keep any commission you earn in and over that. And the range for that desk was anywhere between £2,000 and about £3,500 a month, depending on the hub costs. Big money, but it was a big brand. So you had a lot of walk-in business, a lot of business you won off the back of the brand. So at that time, the brand did half my job for me and I did the other half. So it was a worthwhile investment for that amount of money. And essentially, I had a desk in an office. I had an area of 2,000 homes. I got to farm, and anything that came in within those 2,000 homes, so that patch was mine. Did that for about 2 years. They actually returned to a more traditional model and offered me an employed role back, which I accepted. They paid out my pipelines, so it was all hunky-dory. So actually the self-employed working on your own estate agency model for me isn't as brand new as it is for some others, because essentially I trialed it, how long, 10, 11 years ago now, for a certain period of time. So actually, when you look back, I don't think there would have been, there's pre-Purple Bricks and pre-online agency really. So that was a good experience, Ben, actually. I enjoyed that.
And do you know what, mate? It's probably, as much as I genuinely wasn't planning to ask you that question, Scott, it's probably quite really a well-positioned question, in all honesty, because again, going back to what I said before, obviously we're not planning to give these episodes any formal structure or anything like that, but we want to try and make sure there's a bit of a loose topic kind of running through every episode. And today, Scott, obviously, as you know, we're going to discuss sort of whether or not someone should start up by themselves, and maybe some of the fears that you've got on the outside looking in when it is that you're considering kind of making a leap into setting up your own business. So I guess kind of touching on your background there, it's interesting because you obviously swallowed that frog, if you will, about a decade ago. what about you, just anecdotally? Like, we'll get around to sort of me and conversations that we both have with agents, week in, week out at the moment. But casting your mind back a decade or so ago, was it quite an easy transition for you? Did you kind of think, yep, okay, this makes total sense. I'm going to earn more money, therefore I'm going to go self-employed and go into this structure? Or was it a real, oh my God, I need to consult the family. I need to, do my research. I need to really be sure that I'm doing it. How big of a deal was it for you back then going into that setup?
I'd always wanted to be self-employed, and I guess when an opportunity to step into it with so many of the hurdles taken away for me, so Rightmove and Zoopla and SEO, everything was provided for me, so it was quite a low risk approach to giving it a go. And I remember thinking, if I don't take, there's no easy opportunity in business, but it was an easier opportunity than setting up completely from scratch on my own. I felt like if I didn't take that, then likely I was going to just continually be one of these people that always talks about starting their own business. So in a way, I think I pushed myself into it on the basis of, it's now or never. If you don't do it now, you'll be a talker for the rest of your life, which was probably more scary for me than actually the leap. It was more scary for me to fast forward 10 years and look at myself and think, you didn't try it. So, when we go back, I forget, I genuinely forget now, but actually, even just with this conversation, it's got me remembering that, my son was one. We bought a doer-upper house that was completely, like, the house was terminal. It was new floorboards, new roof, the lot. We were doing up a house. We were living in a bedroom at my wife's parents' house, and my wife was pregnant with our second child when we launched our business. So you look back and you think there was absolutely nothing really about timing was saying that this is the right time. But luckily for me, my wife's got trust in me and was quite happy just to say, yeah, I don't think no one would believe this, but we wouldn't even have had a 5-minute conversation about it. I probably just would have brought up this idea and she would have just said, go for it if you want to. Yeah.
Mate, do you know what though? It's interesting because listening to kind of you just explaining that story, it reminds me of a conversation that I had. Obviously, I'll keep names out of this, but I was chatting to a guy earlier this year who was considering coming into eXp, right, to set up his business. And we've been speaking for a little while. And we kind of went through the point where, we had a few conversations, we'd gone through all the ABCs, I'd answered all of his questions, and it kind of got to the crunch of, okay, so, are you going to be setting up your business? Are we going to move this forward? And he said, he went, Ben, I just don't know if it's the right time. He went, we're still in the midst of, this global pandemic, COVID-19 is still a thing. It just doesn't, I'm just not sure that now's the right time to be kicking off a new project. I'm not sure. And then before I could even interrupt and say anything, he just went, actually, mate, he went, if we was having this conversation this time last year, it would have been a bad time because, I was skint. I didn't have that much money. The year before that, there was Brexit. In fact, 2 or 3 years before that, Brexit was going on. Before Brexit, I was a new dad and we moved into a new house. He said, actually, thinking back, I could probably give you what felt like a justified excuse in my own mind, a reason as to why I wouldn't take this step for the last 7 or 8 years. He said, yeah. So do you know what? Yeah, now is a good time. The perfect conditions don't exist. And that guy's subsequently come into the business and, gone on to do quite well. So I always think, and that's always stuck in my mind, and I've used that example with so many people I've spoke to since, because I'm absolutely 100% sure that perfect market conditions and perfect timing is a myth. It doesn't exist. You can always save more money. You can always be in a better position. The kids can always be another year older. But ultimately, as soon as you get that next milestone, there's something else that you want to improve. And if you go chasing perfect circumstances, you end up taking no action and you become a procrastinator.
I agree. And I think the condition of the market is always fairly relative anyway to the, like right now the market's booming, which is great, but every big agency near me is doubling down on their staff. They're all working longer hours. They're doubling down on their marketing. They're bringing in trainees. They're expanding. I'm competing with that. Whereas if the market was to recline a bit and go backwards, which at some stage, whenever it will do, they're going to be laying off staff and halving their marketing costs and closing an hour early. And then actually, as long as I continue to do what I do, I should still be fine. Same for you. So I don't know. I've always felt that that's one of those things that's fairly relative. And I don't think there's a point in our lives when we ever don't have what is a legitimate excuse. This is the thing. It's not like we're not talking about silly things. Considering a pandemic or Brexit or financial crisis or the fact you're about to have a baby, none of those things are unreasonable things to have in your mind when you start a business. It's not like you're mad. They're so easy to justify to yourself. But as you say, you can actually itemize every year with a reason why you shouldn't have done that, whether that be something political, cultural, or even a bit closer to home and in your family life. In your 20s, you're maybe having kids and looking at weddings. In your 30s, it's probably mortgages. In your 40s, it's I don't know, kids off to uni.
Do you know what, mate? Do you want to think it boils down to? I think it's do you want to look for excuses or do you want to look for solutions? I think that's the ultimate question, right? So again, man, reflecting so much on my own anecdotal experience, and this is totally random, but I did a viewing on a property last week, right? So I've got this investment property. Kind of sounds like the one that maybe you bought a few years back, falling to pieces. Absolutely just needs everything doing to it. And I did a back-to-back viewing on it, right? So I had this guy come in and he was like, oh my God, this is a project that's falling apart. That needs doing, that needs fixing. The windows are blown. That's going to be a fortune. That looks structural. All these problems, all these issues, all this horror that he was slowly talking himself out of buying this house, right? And then he left and the lady came in and she was like, oh my God, the size of these rooms, the size of those windows, the natural light, the potential that could extend, that could be the best family room. This is an amazing location. And for every negative, she was finding a positive because she could see the potential on the upside, whereas the other guy could only see the downside and the drama and what could go wrong. And it's crazy, two people, same property, same market conditions, same budget, yet they've both had a totally different experience from viewing the same house at the same time with the same person. And I think that's applicable to so many different areas of our lives, obviously business included.
Yeah, agreed. No, I agree with you 100%. And I mean, from my point of view, again, you're like me, right? So over the last 12 months, you spoke to probably fair to say hundreds of people considering going self-employed. So before joining eXp, probably much like you, I only knew my own thought process in launching a business and going out on my own and how that felt to me. And now that I spoke to hundreds of people, everybody's different, but you get some common themes, don't you, as to why people might not want to give it a go.
You do.
I think what's changed, though, I think the landscape's changed, Ben, because now I think there'll be a lot of people now that can thrive in a self-employed model that maybe weren't necessarily the right people to go out and launch a more traditional estate agency. And I include me in that. I don't think I'd be capable of running an agency. Fine, getting on listings, selling them, great. But the accountancy, paying invoices, sorting out the office, the electrics, I honestly think that's just too many plates for me to spin. I mean, would you ever, do you think you'd have gone down the traditional line if the self-employed models didn't spring up?
So, I mean, no, I wouldn't, but I can say that being a little bit of a unicorn in that I've run my own businesses before. I've had my own office, my own teams, my own structures. I've had, everything that goes with that, for better or worse. And I've kind of tasted it and sampled it. So I know that what you're saying is right. It's a lot of plates to spin. It's a lot of responsibility. It's difficult when you've got teams and expensive leases and you've got all this overhead to kind of account for. It's not a fun place to be. Yet on the outside looking in, I think sometimes people ultimately, because they've not experienced that before, they consider that to be the goal. It's the ego. I'm the man. And they kind of want all those things because they kind of, in their own mind, they frame that as them being at the top of the tree, if you will. Whereas I've kind of gone through that process, realized how not fun, and to be perfectly honest, Scott, how at times just perfectly not profitable that business is. And having seen things now on the other side of the fence, the way that I have at eXp, I can honestly say that I could never go back to that way of working. I really, really wouldn't. Now, had you have asked me that before joining eXp, my answer probably would have been very different, because I'll be honest, Scott, and I don't know about your reasons for coming in, but when I first kicked off with eXp, it was very selfish. There was nothing about, working with other agents, nothing about mentorship, nothing about growth, nothing about transforming an industry. There was nothing romantic and revolutionary beyond basically Ben Moore in his own little bubble trying to grow a business in the Fylde Coast. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. People come in on their own selfish missions and they just want to conquer their market and, build a great business for them and their families. That's absolutely fine. And the way that I saw it was that eXp was just a vehicle to eliminate the risk and lower that financial barrier to entry to allow me to do that. Now, I probably would have thought, and I don't know if you'd say the same, mate, maybe you frame things differently, but when I first kicked off, eXp was kind of a short to medium term plan where I'd kind of, ride it out, I'd get on my feet, build my personal brand, get known locally, get a bit of a pipeline, and then eventually maybe go on to pastures new and set up, Ben Moore Estates Part 2 and kind of go down that avenue. But my mentality has totally changed over the course of the last 18 months where it's really opened my eyes. And I know it sounds cheesy and cliche. I don't want to sound like I'm laying this on thick in terms of it being the eXp show, but I just think that this framework is going to be the best thing that could have ever happened for the UK agent and therefore the UK consumer and the UK market. So I'm really excited about that. I couldn't think of doing anything different to what I am. What about yourself?
The same, mate. Yeah, I hate to say it. I'd love to offer a different view, but I was coming in. I mean, you say short to medium term. I was off the second I got to, I think, 30 grand and 20 properties on my books. 30 grand pipeline, I was out. I just thought this is a stepping stone for me to running my own business, and exactly the same, mate, exactly the same. And I hadn't given collaboration a thought. I hadn't given being part of eXp a thought. I mean, I remember when I first joined, it's probably a bit further away from you, but we had the party in London when I'd been here about a month, which was free drinks, great food, get together. And it's like an hour and 10 minutes from me on the train. And I didn't go. I remember Olivia kept saying, "Oh, you coming, Scott? You coming?" I was like, "Oh, I'll see." But in my head, I'm thinking, why would I want to do that? I don't need to get to know everyone else at eXp. It doesn't interest me. I'm here for me. I just want to get my head down, make some money, and move on. Because I mean, even down to that was literally the point when I went from being slightly interested to end when I was told that you could take your stock and your pipeline with you. The second I heard that, I was like, okay, great. Well, why would I look at any other options now?
It's just an absolute no-brainer. So let me just pause on that and do a bit of a deep dive there, mate. So you got to that point where Olivia, and for those of you listening, by the way, who don't know, Olivia is part of our support team. So she helps our agents and, she helps a lot of things happen in the background. Olivia's a legend. But when Olivia was trying with all the might to convince you to go into that gathering and you wouldn't do it, safe to say now, if there was an eXp gathering, even 5 hours from your house, you're probably going to make an effort to get there.
Oh yeah, sure.
What is it that's like, what changed that?
I think we one of our conversations recently, in fact, before we jumped on the call today, was I certainly didn't join for the collaboration and the idea of having colleagues and an environment or a community that I felt part of. Didn't give that 1% of thought. But now that I've seen the benefits, both for my business and sometimes emotionally, just have other people you can reach out to and say, you won't believe what the F just happened to me. It's great. So I think although that didn't get me to join, it's definitely going to be a reason why I'm going to stay for considerable amount of time. I mean, if we just spoke about the work benefits, the actual benefits to your business to be working alongside great people, we were talking recently about the idea of what we felt was a good pipeline until some other people come in and did quite a lot better than that.
Me and you have been at odds like all along, haven't we, competing with each other on various metrics, outline included.
I don't really know why, but I don't really care because I think it's been to both of our benefits, isn't it? And it has always been good natured, and it has. I've definitely seen. I mean, it was an agent. I think it's fair to say that one of the agents that I first brought in, won't mind me saying his name, Gavin, and probably at this point there's sort of 15, 16 of us on 25, 30 grand pipelines, all sort of change week by week by a few grand here and there. But then suddenly Gavin joins and about 6 weeks later he's on a 55 grand pipeline. And you look, and the great thing about it is, instead of that being a negative and us going, oh, you know, this guy's great, and the next week, or no, next week's not the right, but how long, what, 4 or 5 weeks later, all of a sudden, there's like a ton of us up at 50, 55 grand as well.
Mate,
now, you know, what we couldn't help is that Gavin then went on to 75. and along with some other agents, who I won't name, but Gavin won't mind, that bar has just been continually pushed, but we've all gone along together. Has that been like an expectation of what's possible?
I think it's like, I know this word gets bounded around so much, and I think sometimes companies use it not really understanding or really caring what it means. It just sounds good on social media. But we talk about culture, right? And we talk about like the energy and the atmosphere and the collaboration, and I think that the best word I can use is energy, just that connection between agents to kind of will and want to push people to go on and do more. And I think for me, that's one thing that I've seen, because when we started, we had zero culture, right? I think I was agent number 5, you was agent 4, 5, 6, 4, 6, 7, you in and around me somewhere.
Well, I was agent number, well, this puts into perspective, I was agent number 23.
Oh, was you? I thought you was much closer.
No, but the day I joined, we had 18 properties on the market.
Right.
So, you know, at that point, you look and, well, slightly off subject, but I think at that point, that's probably half the reason why you and I look and choose it as a stepping stone. Because in all honesty, I wasn't convinced that eXp was going to be the success it's been. I thought use it while it's there, actually. Did you?
Yeah.
I thought, use this before they pull the plug on it, because I'm not sure it's going to...
Mate, absolutely. Because I remember Adam telling me about it on the first conversation when he was kind of educating me on the model. And he was talking about, like, you know, the UK market's due for disruption, and we can do this and we can really revolutionise it, and agents are going to have more autonomy and they're going to earn more money. And you kind of hear these things and it's like, yeah, cool, great. That's your mission, not mine. Right.
Yeah.
And it was very much like, I'm happy to pay into the pot and contribute and, you know, be a contributing member while I'm here. But like you say, it's going to be a short-term stopgap until my pipeline gets to X, and then I'm out of here. But I think it's every agent coming in since. And again, because obviously we've only dealt with very experienced agents up until this point, and, you know, we've got regional directors, we've got, you know, people who've been training directors of some of the best known brands in the UK, ex-president of the National Association of Estate Agents, the current president of the NAEA, all these high caliber people who've kind of come in and brought with them a different energy, a different take, different ideas that have gone into the melting pot. And I think culturally that's just bred this kind of this vibe where everyone wants to see everyone succeed. Everyone feels like a high performer, and that just encourages everyone to push those standards. And I take, you know, I can definitely relate to what you said about Gavin going up in the pipeline. I did the same when Kirk came in and suddenly, you know, went from 0 to like 80 grand, which felt virtually overnight. And I looked at his figures, I was like, the guy's done like 6 sales. Like, wow, that just shows you what's possible. And it kind of pushes you to up your game as well. So I think it's really interesting, not even from an agency point of view, just from a business point of view and a cultural point of view and a psychological point of view, how people can kind of chip in and contribute towards the ever-rising tide of a movement just by simply being the best version of them, if that makes sense. And that
best version of them is the key as well, because I think the really interesting thing is that there's no typical eXp agent. You know, I remember, you know, again, I'm conscious. I know some people really well at eXp, so I can use their names, and other people I have to say an agent. But back when Gavin and Kirk were at the top of the pipeline league table, if you like, that we see every week, they were doing it on a more of a lower volume, higher fee basis. And then you've got another agent who's up there equally with a 60, 70 grand pipeline, whose average fee is 1,800 quid.
Yeah.
And they're just going high volume, market domination in their area. I want my boards up everywhere, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I think that's great as well, because what happened when you come in, you can almost say, well, look, it's not that I'm going to mimic that person exactly, but that person's trying to achieve what I would like to achieve. So I can try and learn the best bits from that person.
Yeah.
Whereas if you came in and everyone was doing it the same old way, you'd either have to adapt too much and change what you were trying to achieve, or possibly not achieve it. So I think that's what's really interesting about sort of the eXp thing, is the fact that not everyone's trying to do the same thing, Ben, either. I mean, if you're gonna say what makes a successful business, it's achieving from it what you wanted to achieve. Now, if you want to go and make yourself £1 million and you manage to do that, then you've had a successful business because the outcome was what you sought to achieve. If the outcome you're trying to get is you want to work 15 to 25 hours a week, have weekends and evenings to yourself, work with a small amount of clients at a great fee and only work in stately homes, and then you can do that and have a lifestyle business.
I think it comes down to that again, that word of autonomy. I think and you can't underestimate what a powerful thing that is, Scott, because it's like, I think if someone was to come in and we were to say, okay, this is the eXp way, this is how we do it, this is what your fee must be, this is what the terms must be, this is how you must generate leads, this is how you must promote yourself. If we kind of dictated to people like that, I think it'd kind of suck the fun out of what they're doing. I think you have to be allowed to be an entrepreneur and spread your wings and do things your way, essentially decide the DNA of that business yourself as an independent business owner, for it to feel authentically yours and for you to buy into it and for that business to be your baby. And I think when you feel that connection and that sense of pride almost, I think that's when you turn up in a better capacity. That's when you're there, you're more hands-on with your customers, you perform much better than what you would do if someone was dictating to you. And I think that comes back to the whole thing about transforming the perceptions of an industry is first looking after the agent. That's the first domino. If the agent's got that autonomy, that freedom, if they're in love with the business, if they're earning well, that's the first domino then, where they're going to look after the customer and then standards are going to improve. And that's how we're going to truly instigate a movement in the space, I feel.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's exciting as well, because it's like the tip of the iceberg. If that, it's like the tip of the iceberg at the moment, isn't it? It's still got such a long way to go. And I think I did not think that it was any sort of revolution. I didn't think that fast forward a year, everyone was going to be talking about self-employed models, and almost now that self-employed exists in its own right, the question's moved on to what model is right for you, which is a completely different space than where we were this time last year, which is where to even go self-employed, you were seen as such a maverick, right? Whereas now it's which model fits you best.
Yeah. And do you know what, mate? That's another thing that, I'm really proud of, mate. Like really, really, really proud of, because I know that when eXp first kind of came onto the scene and Adam was educating me on the model, I had nothing to compare it to. I knew that, there was maybe one or two that had been around. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We didn't invent this thing. It had existed before we came along, but no one had ever done it to any point of really penetrating the market and making noise and putting a spotlight on this space. And I think we successfully did that. And it's good to see that some of the other models that, some people may say are our competition. I know, Scott, our view is that they're not really competition, I guess. It's just horses for courses. But it's good to see that they've come on leaps and bounds and they're having growth off of the back of the momentum that we've managed to build. And I think that's only a good thing for the market, right? Surely.
Options have got to be, yeah. I mean, and that be whether you're talking about the client at the end or the agent in the middle. As you say, I think probably the first domino is the agent having a great choice, which then enables them to go out and be the best version of themselves and do the best job they possibly can because they're in the right place.
So let's just take this. I guess we kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, but hopefully one that was worth going off on. We've got a habit of doing it, haven't we? Jesus, not even had a beer yet. Let's focus more. So we've focused on, so that we've kind of, I guess, discussed the model, I guess, in some depth a bit, sort of accidentally, really. Let's focus on who shouldn't be coming into this, because I think there's a lot of people, and the first question and probably the biggest question is this for me? So I know I've got my opinions and my takes. What's yours? Like, who do you feel this would benefit? And equally as importantly, who do you feel should maybe think, actually, not for me, I'm probably not going to come into this kind of model?
I think it suits it suits a much wider audience than necessarily people who would have gone out and started up a traditional business, which I think is really exciting. I think recently I've broken it down to, so I've started asking agents now, like, one question really, which is, do you know how to get properties on the market at the right price at a good fee? If you know how to get properties on the market, then, as you know, a lot of the rest of it falls into place from there. I think if you start to worry too much about the bigger picture, can I get this many sales? Can I do this? Can I do that? It gets too muddy. Do you know how to consistently get houses on the market? And if you do, then I think you'll be a success in this model. personally. I mean, what are your thoughts, Ben?
Similar to you, really, mate. It kind of comes down to one question. And, I'll have this sometimes when I'm speaking to agents who have reached out for the first time to discuss the options and how it works. And the one thing I'll want to know is, are you happy? Basically, are you happy in your current role? Because frankly, it doesn't matter if you're earning £5,000 a year. If you've got an employer maybe that sees your value, you've got a team you enjoy working with, your money, whether you're being paid in someone else's view pennies or riches, as long as you're happy and you feel as though you're being compensated your value and you feel content and you feel fulfilled, and you feel challenged and you're ticking all those boxes, I kind of think to an extent, crack on, good luck to you. But if you've got that fire in your belly where you think, I'm capable of more, I want to do more, I want to earn more, I want more autonomy, I want more freedom, I want to do things my way, I want a better work-life balance, or whatever your kind of want or desire may be, I think if you've got that fire in your belly, and that's the thing, it's down to the individual, only they can answer that question. I think if you're in that camp where something's missing and you just know you can do more, or you strive to do more and push boundaries, I think it fits that avatar of agent. And like you've quite rightly said, mate, it's a total different proposition to us just kicking you out in the wild world and saying, right, go and negotiate a lease, go and pay your electrics, go and recruit staff, go and do this, go and do that. All of that's been taken away and you can just focus on doing what you do best. And that is be there for your customer and sell houses. So you're right, mate. And I think that's the exciting thing, that we don't truly know where our market ceiling is going to be. But we'll get to a point at some stage in our growth where, I mean, what are we on now, Scott? We must be fast approaching 200 agents, right? In about...
Yeah, not a million miles away. Yeah, it's close.
In what, 15, 16 months since the initial launch? Mate,
but if you think this time last year, we were on like 30.
How bad's that?
Yeah, 30 agents this time last year. I mean, the momentum is just huge now, isn't it? You've got, I mean, just quite literally agents joining on a daily basis.
Yeah. You know what? It's like pushing a snowball downhill. Do you know what I mean? Like you kind of work really hard to get that initial snowball. You're pushing it uphill, you get into the top, you get into the peak, and then once you push it down the other side, you can't stop it. It kind of feels like that's what's happening.
Exactly. Well, and the retention, Ben, as well has been massive. I mean, we wouldn't be on 180 agents if we were losing 20 a month.
Yeah.
But we're not. I mean, the retention of agents staying within this business, especially when you think how easy it is for somebody to bail out early on and go back to employed, right? It's like the easiest thing to do. 3 months in, you yet to make any money. Your business is still requiring a lot of effort on a daily basis. You haven't had a huge amount of wins at that point, probably. So it's almost like a newborn baby, isn't it? It's hard work, and some might disagree, but they give you very little back in the early days. It's a little bit like that. I know some people think babies are great, but you've got all the challenges, but hardly any of the benefits in the early days for the first 3 to 6 months, and then all of a sudden that changes. So, our retention has been as much of a key to the growth as has being able to attract new agents.
Yeah. No, absolutely, mate. And out of interest, just to kind of pick up on what you said there, did you hit that wall yourself? Because we always talk, don't we, about this proverbial brick wall, right? Where you get to a point where it's like, can we swear on this podcast? Have we even decided if we can swear?
Well, I said F earlier instead of the other. So yeah, I mean, I don't see why not.
When you get to this point and you think, fuck this, it's too bad, it's not ready. We can officially swear, guys. Did you come to that point where you thought, you know what, the fucking towel's going in the fucking ring and I'm not going to fucking continue with this? Or did you find it quite smooth?
Well, I mean, you've got to remember, you and I we've had 2 lockdowns during our first 12 months. I mean, the second one, far less of a hit, fine. In the first one, I think most of us were probably questioning ourselves at that point, not necessarily deeply looking at options, but I think at that point I did have to have one eye open on what am I going to do if this doesn't work out, and I honestly can't even remember what my options were. I mean, fortunately, the fortunate thing was the second lockdown was over. The phones started ringing straight away, and we were off. So I would say I've never doubted myself whilst working within this specific model, but I think that might be possibly where I've seen and done it. So I'm not the greatest of examples because most people come to eXp will be their first self-employed agency role.
Sure.
Whereas I did it before, and I would say I went through that last time, because inevitably you start with a pot of money, whether that be 5,000, 10,000 or 50,000 to get your business off the ground. And everyone thinks that's great. Yep, I've got £20,000. I pay myself £3,000 this month. I've got 17. Great, I've still got 17. Before you know it, that starts to get about 8 and then 5. And then there is that point when you think, hang on a minute, this is touch and go now. So within eXp, I was expecting it and prepared for it. But within my first ever self-employed role, yeah, definitely got really nervous around, and it was all money related.
See, mate, it's interesting because similar in some ways in that. So my background, you know, I started up my first business having only been in the industry for about 18 months, 2 years. So I'm an entrepreneur who just happens to be passionate about estate agency. I'm not an estate agent who just happened to start a business. So I've always been passionate about business improvisation. I've always kind of felt that need to do it by myself. So I set my first business up back in 2012, and I won't go into the weeds of the ins and outs of every one, but very condensed story. I scaled that business from a home-based business, grew a massive portfolio, sold it to an investment company, came back up north, did the exact same again, sold that, moved to the Fylde Coast, set up where I am now. Now, when I set up with eXp, I was definitely on the leaner end of the budget scale. So I started off with about £2,500, so next to nothing really. And by the way, don't let me mislead people on that. I started off with £2,500, but I was delivering pizzas at night. I had to take a side hustle job, doing consultancy work for an investment firm. Becky was paying most of the household outgoings at that point, so the kids were still fed. So I had £2,500, but there was a bit more to the picture. Anyway, it's a very lean budget, but I'd kind of had that confidence that I'd successfully built agencies in the past, and maybe ego was driving me forward to think, I know what I'm doing. I've been here, I've done it, I can do it again. It's not an issue. But I definitely got to a point, Scott, quite early on, I'd say probably in my first 6 weeks, 8 weeks, where I thought this just isn't going to work for me, man, because I think I'm ever the optimist, and I think the optimist in me was thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this strategy, I'll make a video about that, I'll share into this group, I'll send this flyer, I'll take these different approaches, and I'm just going to have confidence that it's all going to come together. And when that didn't happen, and when I could see that very limited pot of cash dwindling very quickly, I kind of got to the point and just thought, it's not sustainable. I'm just going to have to bugger off and try something else. And
why did the doubts? Were you doing the wrong thing early days, or did you just not give the right things enough time to land?
A bit of both, I think. So I wasn't doing the wrong things necessarily, but I was doing the wrong thing for the period of time that I was in my business at that point. So a big thing for me was, and again, this kind of comes back full circle to what we said earlier, Scott, about the power of collaboration and having a team and other experienced agents around you, albeit it was very nominal at this point, because I think there was probably only 10 or 15 agents in the business. But I did have Adam, right? Obviously, Adam Day, the expansion leader, who you and I both speak to most weeks. And I kind of got to this point where I was going all in on Facebook, putting all this effort in content, making all these videos and, you know, pushing sort of landing pages, trying to generate local data, which are all absolutely the right things to be doing. But when you've got a £2,500 budget, and when that's going down on a monthly basis, and when you've got no stock, with the best will in the world, whilst it's great to build a database for your business, you need business today. You need people who are ready to instruct like yesterday. And I was finding that I was struggling to connect with that avatar. I wasn't really getting, and that's a bit of a cliche phrase, but I wasn't getting my hands on that lower hanging fruit. And it kind of took Adam on the outside coming in to say, look, mate, you need to diversify your strategies. Why don't you try this instead? And it took some convincing, because I think in my own mind, I thought, well, I've done this before and I know I can make this work. But the bottom line is that I didn't have enough cash to kind of see out the life cycle that it would take for that strategy to wash through. And I had to be really challenged. And to be honest, I had to be really kind of talked into changing tact and going with someone else's recommendation to build the business. But looking back with hindsight, it's so important that I did. Like I can't emphasize enough how valuable that conversation was, because had he not have challenged me, and had I have not have been able to swallow my pride and make that pivot, there's no way I'd be here today, mate. I'd be back in a minimum wage job, like cleaning treadmills and whatever else.
I think that's common, Ben. You know, especially because what you were doing is justifiable. Again, so it's not like you weren't sitting on a deck chair in the sunshine having a beer all day. You were doing things that, if anyone at any one point said, "Oh, what are you doing right now, Ben?" "Oh, I'm, brushing up my LinkedIn page, or I'm working on some social media content." All that kind of thing is like, you need to do it. So I would, if I'd have just had that conversation, I'd have gone, "Yeah, great, Ben. Yeah, cool, crack on." Yeah, great. It's I call it like varnishing the deck of the Titanic. It's, it potentially, some of the decking on the Titanic could have done with a varnish, but if there's a great big hole in the boat, if you're on top doing that, it's like, it's just not priority. Like, where is the hole in your boat today? What do you need to fix as an absolute matter of urgency? And I think you're definitely an ideas man, aren't you? So you're going to have more ideas in a day than you've got time.
Yeah.
So the worst thing for you is you're having to pick out like 50 great ideas probably a day, which one or two can actually implement, and more importantly, which one or two are the most important. And it might be that you've got to work on the less interesting one.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm going to say, for me, it's prospecting and direct mail. It's like dull, it's boring, it's probably seen as most people to be quite out of date, but it bloody well works, or certainly it works a lot quicker than nurturing people on social media. Yeah. Having said that, as you well know, to flip that, if I didn't join eXp, I would only be doing direct mail and only be, well, I wouldn't even be on Facebook, I wouldn't have thought. And so as a result of communicating with people like yourself and others that are getting results on Facebook, I'm now there, and probably that's where I get more leads for my business than any other. But again, another example where collaboration is really useful, because if you're sitting in your own echo chamber on your own, it's so easy to make the same mistakes every day.
So important, mate. So important. And I don't think, do you know what? I think that whole collaboration aspect, I don't think that's something that we speak about and upsell enough. And going back to what I said at the start of the podcast about, you know, with everyone being so experienced and so, you know, senior and established and having seen so much in their career before even coming into eXp, that is quite frankly advice that you just can't put a price on. Or you can put a price on it in a normal world. If you wanted to go and get a mentor with that type of experience, you'd be paying tens of thousands of pounds a year for that advice to cut that learning curve. And whilst I don't think there's a shortcut to success, I will acknowledge that the one hack is having access to someone who's walked the path before you. And we can't let ego get in the way of just how important that collaboration piece is.
I think part of the reason why we don't talk about it too much is because as soon as you start talking about it, you get this idea in your mind of like pointless meetings and sitting around for hours at a time talking about it. And collaboration normally means somebody else is doing something great, so we're going to insist that you all do it now as well. Whereas, you know, I liken the eXp collaboration to like the perfect neighbour doesn't bother you when you're putting your bins out, right? When you're in your pants at 10 o'clock at night and you're trying to get rid of your jingling empties, they're not on you, right? But when you need a Phillips head screwdriver, next door, knock and say, I need a Phillips head screwdriver, can I borrow one, please? And they go, yeah, there you go, great. Like, that's the perfect neighbour. And that's the perfect thing. Like, I mean, you and I talk quite a lot, but there's other agents I catch up with very, very rarely. But when I do, in a 2-minute conversation, I've only got to say to them, you doing anything that's working right now? And they might say, oh yeah, I'm joining these Facebook groups and I'm commenting this kind of thing. And I got 3 listens from that last week. And as you know, I'm not actually one for original ideas. I'd like to steal other people's good ones. And, you know, it's all I've done since I've been here is talk to people, find out what's working for them and copy it.
Yeah. And you know what, mate? There's nothing. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel, do you? Do you know what I mean? It's just kind of taking a good idea and building on it and putting your own spin on it. And I think the way that we can kind of neatly summarize, I guess, what we're talking about now is I was speaking to an agent the other week, and they said, "Oh, it's kind of like you work for yourself, but not by yourself." Yeah, and I think that summarizes it like perfectly. Essentially, that kind of says it all.
That's why I've stopped promoting. Get in touch with me if you want to go it alone. Because that's kind of not what we're asking you to do, is it? It's almost like get in touch. I was going to say get in touch if you want to join the army, but that's not quite right either. It's that perfect hybrid, isn't it? Between you've got the autonomy that you're looking for, but at the same time, you've got someone around to lean on. Yeah. I run a very, very small recruitment business from this same log cabin about 5 years ago. And what I noticed was I never knew if I'd had a good month. You know, I could bill 12 grand, but I had nothing to benchmark that with. It could be that I was patting myself on the back, but actually it'd been a blinding month for everyone. I've done nothing special. It could be that everyone else had done 6, and actually I should be going, well, I really deserve to sort of buy myself a little treat or something. I don't know. You had nothing to benchmark yourself against. Whereas, you know, what I love about this thing now is that you've got that as a resource just to catch up with someone and say, I'm finding listings really tough. What about you? Oh
Yeah,
yeah, me too. Okay, that's reassuring. Or actually, I'm not. I'm doing this, and I've got 6 so far in the last 2 weeks. Just gives you something to benchmark yourself against, which I think is really important.
No, massively, mate, massively. And again, those are the things, because I think sometimes when people are on the outside looking in, they're considering coming into the structure, you kind of get distracted by what we consider to be the important things, right? So what are the economics? How much are they going to cost? What do I get access to? Is the CRM any good? These are all questions that people have got, and it's all valid. But actually, I think that what really matters is the current that runs under all that, and that's kind of the glue that holds everyone together. It makes people perform, it allows people to improve standards, and it keeps us all moving forward in our own little missions, I guess, but also as a collective. Which, mate, to be honest, Scott, I think it's probably a quite nice rounded way to wrap this up. We went in a few different directions there, mate, but I think just kind of speaking openly, I think for anyone on the outside looking in with some of the questions about whether or not eXp is going to be the right fit for them, and whether or not they're the right sort of person for this, I think there's probably a lot to read between the lines in there to allow people to make the decision as to whether or not they see themselves being a piece of this puzzle.
I hope so. Just give people an honest insight into it, really, which is all we want. Anyone looking to join, we want to do so with their eyes wide open, right? The last thing you want is someone coming back and saying, you didn't set my expectation that this would be the case. We want to be as open with people as we possibly can and make sure the right people are joining. It's right for them and it's right for us. So, yeah, sounds good, Ben. I actually think we kept more on track than I was expecting us to.
Well, mate, that's an absolute win. The only way is down from here, right? But Scott, just to kind of sign this off, mate, I guess if anyone has got value from the episode and they want to reach out to you directly, drop some content, man. Where do people reach you? How can people speak to you? What's the best channel to pick your brains on?
Yeah, I'm not hard to find. Just any message on LinkedIn. I've got my mobile number on my LinkedIn. I guess we'll maybe add it visually on this or something. I don't know. It must be a way to do that. But yeah, I'm not hard to find, as I know. Well, you're harder to avoid than find, Ben.
That's it, man. That's the plan.
Pop up everywhere.
But guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. We really hope that you found that of some use and some insight. I'll drop all of our contact details for both mine and Scott. Reach out to either of us if you've got any questions. It'll all be in the show notes. And we'll see you on next week's episode. What are we going to discuss next week, Scott? What was it? Let me just find out.
I'm looking at my phone.
I told you it's not overly structured and organised. So next week we're going to discuss considerations when planning your business. So hopefully that's of some value as well. But for now, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
Nice to chat, Ben.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you made it this far, thank you very much for your time and your attention. We both really hope that you found that of some use and some value. And if nothing else, hopefully you got some food for thought or some tips that you can apply into your own mission. Now, if you're interested in hearing more about the eXp UK proposition, or if you'd like to speak to myself or Scott for any reason, you can reach us directly by emailing myself at ben.moore, that's spelled M-O-O-R-E, at exp.uk.com. Or you can reach out to Scott by emailing scott.gunn, that's spelled G-U-N-N, at exp.uk.com. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next episode.